But if I go into the edit mode and click on the same edge that's already sharp and hit split normals, suddenly it will turn it all on again. Marking edges as sharp and making them cyan and making them appear sharp is literally the same command as hitting Alt-N for this normals menu and hitting split. Hi guys, my name is Bardante, and today I want to talk about normals in Blender. And particularly, I wanted to add some extra insight on the way you would work with normals, specifically in Blender, and what kind of sense I got to make out of all of the modes and tools and switches and modifiers that affect normals on the model in Blender, because I found them quite confusing at first. So let's talk about that. The first thing I want to say, it seems like the best way to set up normals to project a normal map onto a low poly mesh is pretty much simply going shade smooth on the object. That's really what you should be doing. I don't think any other mode would work very well. And to understand why, we need to look into certain modes. So first of all, to work with normals, we go into edit mode, and in here, if we hit Alt-N, we have our special menu for manipulating normals. You can also probably find it in mesh normals. This is probably, yeah, it's the same menu. And I feel like the two main commands in here would be merge and split. So right here, let's do it separately, and I will remove the material from this copy of the object. And if we want to go ahead and set up certain specific sharp or soft edges on the object, you can like select certain edges, hit Alt-N, and define them to be like split. And then we suddenly have an issue, and you probably stumbled upon this kind of situation a lot. Whenever you try to add any kind of sharp edge, like mark sharp or whatever, which is a whole other can of worms to me. Like mark sharp won't always make the edge sharp, but it will mark it as this cyan color. Like, and what the hell is all that supposed to mean? The inconsistency with that, like with having sharp edges that are not actually sharp, come from the fact that if we go to this data tab right here on the object, which is another important area to work with the normals on the object. Like all of the normals information can be set up in here in a way. Right now, you can see we have this custom split normal data that is stored right here. If we clear it, suddenly no sharp edges make any effect on the mesh. Again, you have all these sharp edges, but they just don't work. So all of this is very confusing because right now, if I click add custom split normals data again, nothing will happen again. But if I go into the edit mode and click on the same edge that's already sharp and hit split normals, suddenly it will turn it all on again. And this time you can see it turned on this checkbox of auto smooth. And this is very important. And what we saw just now before that was kind of a bug, I think. Not 100%, but I really think it is a bug. Why? Because actually, if you're using custom split normals data, you always have to have auto smooth on. And you can see it right here if you just slow down on this checkbox and read the description. It says it either uses this angle information to define, like if I clear the split normals data, and you see now as we turn it on and off, it either reads all the sharp edges that we marked with cyan in here that happen to be marked with cyan, or it doesn't. But also there's this thing where it reads like the angle. So auto smooth is actually a pretty wrong way to describe this button. So actually, like the auto smooth checkbox right here is actually a switch between either just going shade smooth, which is not auto smooth as you can see, or it can be shade flat, where everything is sharp. So everything smooth, everything sharp are just these two modes right here. They are not auto smooth. And those are the only two things that are not auto smooth, when just all the surfaces are evenly averagely softened in terms of normals, or completely all the normals are being sharp. So there's no actual data stored, just a switch between all soft or all sharp. If you want anything more complex or custom than just all smooth or all sharp, first thing you gotta do is turn on auto smooth, which sounds weird because auto smooth sounds like something that is like shade smooth is kind of auto smooth in my head. It's like a weird wording that sounds like this is pretty automatic. But also, like, you understand that auto smooth means like it now reacts to the angle threshold, right? If the angle is defined very small, it means only a very little change in angle between the polygons, between the triangles, will cause like a sharp edge. But if we increase that threshold, we get more and more of the smooth edges. That makes sense. But then also, if I increase it a lot, which would cause like 180 degrees, it means pretty much all of the edges need to be smooth now, but they're not, and that's because we have all these cyan edges that are marked sharp. And if we just clear all the sharp edges, now auto smooth will only define like the sharpness of the edges very nicely, just based on the angle between the polygons. So in its core, it makes sense that auto smooth is about like it's based on the angle that is right here next to the checkbox, right? But here's the thing, if I just come in to the settings here and I just want to do the custom sharp edges, I don't want to base it on the angles or anything, so I'll naturally uncheck it, and then I will select some edges like these two, and I'll just split the edges on them, and suddenly all of this happens. And like, why? You know, this is weird that is happening. And that is happening is because the moment you start creating custom normals, you immediately turn on auto smooth, which immediately bakes its own angle-based normals into the custom split normals data, which is a very weird and confusing thing, and like why right now it suddenly stored a bunch of new sharp edges into it is also confusing and misleading. It happened because this 44 degrees angle was exactly at that angle where all of these particular edges would become sharp, but since right now I started creating my own custom normals as well, it needed to store this extra data, because these two edges are impossible to just store inside of the switch between shade smooth or shade flat, as well as auto smooth on its own. It can only provide like angle based thing, but this is like under the threshold, yet I still specified it to be sharp. So that's like custom split normals. And they need to be stored in this extra custom split normals data thing, where you just store it like an extra information database for all the normals on the object, and they're stored. But when you do that, like when you just suddenly select two edges and make them sharp, it also turns on auto smooth, makes all the edges sharp within this threshold, and all of those sharp edges together get stored in the custom split normals data. So that's what's happening when you just mark two edges sharp, which is confusing and quite a mess, to be honest. This is like weird. It's hard to learn the behavior of this and how everything is supposed to work. And to store custom edges, you need to have auto smooth on, which is the weirdest thing. Well, like when you store it, this gets grayed out, which means it doesn't look at the angles anymore. But if you turn this off, it stops using the custom normals. So it's all a mess. And how to make sense out of all of it is, first of all, like you can mark things sharp to make sure they stay sharp, like the information would be stored in there. But if you want that to actually work, right now, as you can see, it doesn't, is because anything but shade smooth and shade flat, you turn this on. It has to be on. It has to be on, always. Unless you want to overall shade smooth or shade flat, like any kind of customization, this has to be on. After that, you can like clear sharp on everything, for instance. And now, if you clear this, you automatically activate the angle-based auto smoothing. So if there's literally no custom data stored either in the edges here or in the custom split normals data here, then this becomes active and it actually works. But it also will work if you mark these edges sharp, right? It's just that all of the automatic edges will also, like those angle-based edges, they also get marked as sharp at that moment. I don't know why that's necessarily a good idea to do that automatically, but like now all of that info has gotten baked into this custom split normals data. Like this custom split normals data almost feels weird and misleading in terms of like if we remove it, nothing actually changes, then why the hell do we need it? We need it because right now auto smooth is actually active, and like if I slide it around, yeah, it actually works now, while it will never remove these particular marked sharp edges. When this is gray, if I go into edit mode, and let's say we have a rigged character that actually bends its bones around and everything, you know? So at certain point, a certain angle of a limb or anything will change, and the character will actually like bend somehow, like this, their elbow. Looks great, but you know what I mean. Right now, you can see this is still soft. It didn't become sharp, even though the angle definitely falls under the 88 degrees threshold. But if I clear custom normals data, this suddenly becomes sharp. So it will actually change as you animate the character. You see, like they constantly flicker back and forth between different modes. So when this is like, this angle is active right here, it's not grayed out, it means it will, during animation, react to the angles between the polygons and change the sharpness of the objects. And right now, if I store it in this particular pose right here and go back into edit mode and start moving it around, you'll see that it's baked again, and this edge will always remain sharp because we stored it. But yeah, pretty much, to make sense out of all of this mess, because I feel like I only keep confusing you more, the point is, without anything on, like if we uncheck this and we clear custom split normals data, pretty much what we have is we completely ignore any marked sharp things. We completely ignore any kind of angle-based sharpness. It's all either completely shade smooth or completely shade flat, right? That's the only two things. Only when we turn on this checkbox, we can start working with, first of all the edges that are marked sharp will actually appear sharp. That's number one. Number two, we have this active slider for the angle threshold that can also define certain sharpness based on very strong angles, for instance. But then when we set it up and we like the way it looks, we can then add custom split normals data. So this gets grayed out, and now these normals as they are right now, as we see them, they will stay this way forever, no matter how much we bend the object as we animate it. So that's how we work with it. And one last detail to point out, marking edges as sharp and making them cyan and making them appear sharp if auto smooth is on is literally the same command as hitting Alt-N for this normals menu and hitting split. I also marked it cyan, and it's also a sharp edge. These two pairs of commands are completely interchangeable, so this was marked as sharp, then I'll hit Alt-N and I'll merge the edges, and they're not sharp anymore and they don't appear cyan. So just to add to the confusion, there are two pairs of commands that do literally the same thing but are called completely different, which is great. I mean, if you want to make sense out of it, the point is that this right here, when we select edges and just right-click them, this is the command to mark the edges sharp. And Alt-N is a command to work with the normals, so we split or merge the normals. We can't mark a normal to be sharp or not. We can either split the two normals around this edge or merge them together, and that will make the edge sharp or smooth. Is just a lot of different words in a lot of different places. Now that is all great, and I hope I helped you a little bit to understand how things work. Now moving on from this, there's another one extra thing to talk about. In the situation with like thick cloth, for instance, there are more situations where this matters. But right now, I will clear up all the custom normals and turn off auto smooth altogether. And right now, I'll go to modifiers and I'll add a modifier right here in the edit section. I'm in Blender 4, that's why it looks like this, but you can find it in previous Blenders as well. And here we have weighted normal. This is a very cool and kind of important modifier to work with your normals if you create like hard surface kind of low poly meshes. Low poly meaning not subdivision meshes, but just low poly. Whatever the polygons and vertices you create, those will be the end vertices. In that case, it makes sense to play around with marking certain edges sharp, some of them will be smooth, and then specifically defining certain gradients between, like weights between these normals. Now, what all of this means, let me create a quick material here. I'll make it like metallic and like very reflective. That is looking really gross. I just want to look at this edge of the jacket in here, of this color. So if we go back to the data here, and right now you can see the modifier says enable auto smooth in object data properties to make this at all make any effect. Because again, this is not just shade everything smooth or shade everything flat. The moment we need anything custom, it immediately requires us to turn on this checkbox, which is, again, the wording auto smooth is just, it's not that auto, you know? So you can see what we do here. Now, when I turn this on, we actually don't get a single actually sharp edge when I turn this on. This is different because like if I disable the modifier, now we can see actual sharp edges, right? These are the threshold edges based on like this angle right here, and it really works. Also, some of them are marked sharp still, so those will be also sharp if it's just free roaming auto smooth. But the moment we turn on this modifier, even though it needs this checkbox on, it kind of erases those sharp edges because we're kind of shading smooth right now with this modifier, but we're doing something extra on top of it. And that is that we define certain weights between the polygons. So if I like disable, it will go all sharp. I will switch to like 180 degrees and let's just clear all the sharp edges, like I'll merge them together to like this right now is the same as having shade smooth. So everything is just shaded smooth, right? Absolutely, it looks like weird and round. Even like this flat pocket right here, it looks like it's round, which is wrong. And that's because, you know, all the angles, like this strong 90-degree angle, is being perfectly merged between this very big polygon and this smaller polygon, but in the same way, as if they're like the same, which is wrong. That's why weighted normal based on face area is an important thing. When we turn it on, suddenly this surface right here looks a lot more flat. But if we look to the side, there's no actual sharp edge. So it's still shade smooth in a way. The only difference is that now based on this weight, that for some reason doesn't work at all right now, which is strange. But that's like a whole separate battle that I'll keep fighting. What's important is the effect of this modifier on adding a special distribution of this whole averaging gradient between normals, where, you know, you get rounded borders right here on the edge of the cloth that won't necessarily make all the like flat planes of your cloth also like very weird and round. So this modifier alone, just adding it without doing any extra actions on top of that, just adding it and, well, making sure auto smooth is on, this alone will create this very useful improvement in many cases. Like if you create some kind of soft object but you don't want everything to look oddly rounded for no reason, this modifier will bring a lot of sense into like making things a lot more appropriately rounded in the right places. So we have round borders but not round the whole, you know, giant surface here, which is a very good filter that we can apply here. And yeah, we can actually apply it. And before I do, you can see we don't have any custom split normals data stored, but when I apply it, it gets stored exactly in here. So right now it's stored in here. If I clear it, it will disappear because now there is nowhere to store it, but Control Z and we're back to it. So right now, this is like the best way to show this low poly model. But again, in order for this to work, you need this checkbox always on. If you turn it off, we're back to just shade smooth with all the pockets right here looking very like bloated like this. So this is like this extra fix that we defined and stored it. So that's another important thing. Now, the last moment I wanted to cover, when we talk about projecting normals from a high definition mesh on a low definition mesh. And as I was doing it, I wanted to figure out like what's the best way to set up a low poly mesh to use with the normal map. Like what kind of settings, like these all kinds of different settings with normals that I just showed you guys, which setting is the best to project a normal map onto? Like what kind of look should the mesh have before you start projecting? And I tried different versions, like all of them, and none of them had any good results. It's really weird. Right now you can see this is simply shade smooth right now. There is no custom split normals data or auto smooth on, nothing like that at all. And the reason to that, like, I'm not sure if it necessarily makes like total sense to avoid using any kind of custom normals or whatever. Right now, like, we're using these weighted normals that look really good. And I feel like there may be a slight benefit to having normals on the object set up in a way that even if, let's say, the normal map is not being used at the moment, the jacket would still look decent, you know, not look too round in here and with weird like shading at the bottom in here, you see, because the edge is strong, the bottom row of polygons in here, they are like curved down. That's the way it always looks without a normal map if it's just shade smooth. These weighted normals that we just stored from the modifier, they actually make the jacket look a little bit better when there is no normal map on it. But the problem with this is, like, if you create a model and store its normals like this, and then you will project normals onto it, for whatever reason, Blender will always ignore all of your custom normals. If this checkbox is on, it will only look at the angle threshold and just bake onto a model as if this is non-existent at all, and like whatever the setting you had, like some edges being sharp, some edges being soft, and you would have actually all of these artifacts baked into your normal map as if it had to compensate for these sharp edges on the normal map. So the normal map will have like sharp, weird ridges like that showing up all of a sudden. It's really weird, although you never had a model with these automatic sharp edges in the middle of the model ever. Like, you just don't use that mode. But if auto smooth is on during the normal map projection, it will use whatever, like, the angle is defined in here. So it will differ, it will distort the normal map, it will look wrong because this is not what you are actually using. And in any case, like, using any sharp edges on the model that is getting a normal map projected onto it is actually a fail to begin with, because you will get these weird sharp edge compensations in the actual normal map. Even if this is actually your model, this is not a good choice for the model to project normals onto. So if you create a model that is a low poly model that will have a specific normal map projected onto it, I'm not talking about a tileable material where it's just, you know, we just tile it, scale it, and it's just like, you know, a rust material or something, but this is like a knife, for instance, and it has a sharp edge, then it's fine to use a normal map on it while you have a sharp edge. Here we're talking about projecting a specific normal map data that is exactly aligned to the UV islands of your object and to the geometry it needs to support for your object. So in that case, it should be just shade smooth, and that's it, because no other mode will give you a good result. So that's how you work with it. If you just project normals onto the low poly mesh, just shade smooth with everything clear in here and no normals modifiers here as well. I hope that's clear. So yeah, that's about it. I feel like I finally figured it out, how to make everything work. I hope this was actually helpful. I hope I made any sense out of it. Do let me know if you have any more questions, but for now this is it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye! It feels good. It feels good to finally completely figure out the final area about modeling an object, which is like how exactly to handle normal maps and where it makes and doesn't make sense to actually put some custom work into it. I hope you guys feel the same.